This video contains topics that some viewers may find distressing. At times we discuss methods that sexual offenders within the aid sector have used against people who have been struck by disasters or emergencies. If you feel uncomfortable now or at any time throughout the video, do stop watching and contact support channels within your organisation. You are not alone. In this video, we use the terms survivor and victim interchangeably. Hello. As Red Cross and Red Crescent leaders and managers, you play a vital part in helping the movement do more to create a safe working environment for all. Today, we want to talk about what you know is a sensitive issue: sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. All staff and volunteers should have had the opportunity to watch our video or receive face-to-face training on PSEA, which stands for the Prevention and Response to Sexual Exploitation and Abuse. That video sets out how to recognise, respond and report incidents and concerns. And in this video, we look at the important role you can play. You'll see practical steps that we have developed in conversation with some of your colleagues, and learn more about how the IFRC PSEA manual can be used by you and your teams. So why are we having these conversations? Because we know that saying we will not tolerate inaction when it comes to tackling sexual exploitation and abuse has not proved enough. Reports of sexual exploitation and abuse, or SEA, continue to surface when and where aid agencies are at work. And if we do not act, we know people will be harmed and we will lose the trust placed in us as an organisation. So, what can we do as leaders and managers? Edwin is the Secretary-General of a national society. Over his 20-year career, he has read too many accounts of sexual exploitation and abuse connected to humanitarian organisations. Edwin knows if his staff or volunteers commit SEA, it would cause significant damage to survivors, families and communities. And if his national society cannot provide evidence of a robust response, it would impact on the trust placed in his organisation, putting projects, morale among volunteers and staff, and the reputation of the entire movement at risk. Edwin knows that meaningful PSEA measures truly matter, and that future funding for humanitarian operations will depend on how PSEA measures are introduced and implemented. Edwin is deeply committed to the fundamental principles of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement and the principle of do no harm, but recognises that this has to be demonstrated in what we do, not just what we say. Edwin knows there is no easy fix for SEA, but that the IFRC PSEA manual details preventative measures that are effective and can be put in place quickly. The manual includes a tool to help national societies identify good practice and gaps against minimum operating standards for PSEA. It has an assessment framework based on 8 standards. This framework also aligns with what the UN expects to find in place within any organisation seeking funding. Edwin uses the manual to develop a PSEA action plan. It sets out what national societies should be able to put in place within 4 years, as well as how to measure progress. As plans can only be effective if people carry them through, Edwin sets up a PSEA working group to get input and perspectives on what changes are needed. This initiative includes leadership, governance, HR, security, operational and technical personnel, and Edwin makes sure that the group is representative of all levels of the organisation, including gender, age and abilities. Edwin makes sure that targets are set and monitored at the highest level. With the right people and the right leadership, Edwin is confident that his national society can implement a PSEA plan for change. But if an incident of SEA occurs, how can we be confident that our reporting mechanisms are accessible and safe? Amira is the Director of Human Resources in a national society. She knows we cannot prevent SEA in every community, but she believes that we can make changes for ourselves to make our national societies a safer environment for all. And we can be prepared to respond quickly when an SEA concern is reported. Amira knows that recruiting a diverse and inclusive team can be a good start when it comes to promoting dignity and respect for all. She also knows that regular communication on PSEA from the leadership team is an important step. Amira knows from her research that SEA violations often go unreported, and she wants to do more to make sure that people impacted by SEA have a safe place to turn. And Amira believes that as our volunteers are the eyes and ears of the movement, they are best placed to identify who is vulnerable to SEA. They will understand what needs to be in place for survivors, their families, and whistleblowers to report SEAs safely. And Amira knows that looking at internal reporting mechanisms for use by volunteers and staff is an opportunity to build trust and drive change. Amira makes it clear to her national society that we will not tolerate inaction when it comes to tackling SEA, and that we are committed to making a difference. She refers to guidance in the PSEA manual to help create a safe working environment where staff and volunteers are encouraged to speak out and challenge poor behaviour. Both formal and informal conversations are a helpful way to make it clear to staff and volunteers what our expected standards of behaviour are. They offer a way to challenge stigmas around PSEA and make it clear that our code of conduct applies to people inside and outside of work hours. Amira also reassures staff and volunteers that SEA incidents and allegations will be handled in confidence, with care and assistance provided for those who need it. Plus, Amira makes sure that she has a PSEA lead at board level in her national society, as this signals that SEA is taken seriously. She looks at how teams can be diverse and inclusive as a range of voices promotes dignity and respect for all. And gender balance can lead to a better understanding of SEA and how to prevent it in our national society. Amira then looks at how internal reporting mechanisms are designed. She uses the PSEA manual and makes sure that any changes are developed with the volunteers and staff in mind. Questions to be answered include: what are the most appropriate channels that our people can use to share an SEA concern? Does this vary with those groups with less power within our national society? Are there any barriers to people using the mechanism? How can we include those who are at risk of being excluded? Amira's work is vital to improving the reporting mechanism, but how can PSEA inform how we design our programs? Gabriel is a senior program manager. He knows there have been occasions when people have abused their position as part of humanitarian programs. He knows that people can be vulnerable to SEA if they rely on others for jobs, food, or resources. Gabriel also knows that programs intending to help the most vulnerable can have blind spots which inadvertently put people at greater risk. For example, publishing lists of beneficiaries can have unintended consequences. Distributing money to women in the aftermath of a natural disaster resulted in some being a target for theft and abuse. Gabriel knows that programs must have a thorough assessment of risk and a clear understanding of how to protect people who should benefit from our projects. He knows that PSEA should be included in all projects and proposals, that donors expect the measures to be in place, and that the people we serve rely on our commitment to do no harm. Gabriel makes sure that all proposals and programs include action on PSEA to help ensure all programs are safe and inclusive. He uses the PSEA manual to carry out an SEA risk assessment for the program, and he establishes a complaints mechanism for safe reporting of SEA concerns by community members. Gabriel works with advisors in the community to help identify those most vulnerable to SEA and what barriers they may face in speaking out. He also works with them to make sure the most vulnerable and marginalised in communities hear that they have the right to receive humanitarian assistance free of charge and without being harmed, and that they understand expected standards of behaviour for staff and volunteers. When planning project activities, Gabriel considers how to mitigate the risks identified through the risk assessment. He identifies practical actions to take. Keep information safe and confidential. Establish safe spaces for activities. Ensure teams are gender balanced. Check staff, volunteers are never alone with a child or vulnerable adult. Gabriel also makes sure staff, volunteers and community members understand that we have referral pathways designed to offer specialist help. They cover child protection, sexual and gender-based violence, counselling, reproductive healthcare, legal services, and people trafficking. And because of the complexities involved in PSEA, Gabriel allocates budget for training, communication, supportive supervision, and monitoring of volunteers. He also makes sure that PSEA focal points are identified and that procedures are in place to be able to investigate and respond to any concerns raised. Finally, he looks to record success stories and human interest stories, as we can all benefit from positive examples of PSEA in action. The work that Edwin, Amira, and Gabriel are involved in will prove crucial to us all. And what Edwin, Amira, and Gabriel do, you can do too. Their hard work is the difference between saying we do not tolerate sexual exploitation and abuse and acting on it. You can access the PSEA manual and use its tools and guidelines. And when you understand the critical role you can play in PSEA, we all benefit. Your colleagues, our volunteers, and the communities in which we work. Together, we can all make changes to how we work, and together we can help prevent sexual exploitation and abuse. This is our commitment, but it is nothing without your commitment. Recognise, respond, report.